Hey guys, it's Hurricane Joe. I did this video, but I wanted to do it again because sometimes I get dyslexic and I say the wrong things. So I really don't want to mislead anybody. So please, sometimes you got to double check the chords I make because I'm thinking it right, but you get nervous, you say the wrong things. But this video is so important. I want to make sure I do as good a job as I possibly can, and take it, considering I got technical difficulties. I'm gonna say it again. I want to stress. This video is going to explain why when Phil Collins, he does a great series that says about Steve Clark, when he first heard the Pyromania tapes, why when he heard it, it sounded nothing like anything he heard before, and why Steve was such a unique rhythm player because he didn't play non-standard chords. And really was on Pyromania that it felt like Steve developed his unique sound, and he had free reins to use that classical training he had and make the best use of it and make a unique sound. There are three things I want to talk about in this video that are huge to the new Def Leppard sound, to where it helped them get commercial success and basically become the biggest band in the world. The first was his third inversion, using inversions using a third instead of a fifth. His second was his new way of following Page's use of the F chord shape, moving up and down the neck, but taking that F chord shape and breaking it down and turning it into a minor chord so you can get the minor chord feel from that. And third, how he knew that if you played a major chord in a key that corresponded to the Lydian mode, how you're able to play it in a different way and create a unique sound that was different for Def Leppard, and it really made him huge. So I hope it doesn't sound, too intimidating at first, but please, I put the other videos before when I went over all the modes, I went over all the notes on the guitar, and that's really going to help you get a basis for understanding what I'm doing now. So let's do it. The first technique I want to talk about is how Steve started using a third instead of a fifth when he did his power chords. Now, most rock does a power chord where it's a root and a fifth. And basically a root and a fifth means, because everything goes back to the major scale, the fifth is the fifth note of the major scale. So if I want to do a G power chord and I use the major scale, so it would be G, A, B, C, D. So G and D, D would be the fifth. If you look at that, that's a power chord. You see what I'm saying? Now, I also show you an inversion where you play the D first and then the G, and that's still the same as, I'm sorry, if I did the G, I'm sorry, you play the D first and then the G, that's still the same as this. It sounds real close and similar, but it's slightly different, and it gives you freedom to add vibrato if you want. Now, a lot of guitarists have used that before, and that's a cool technique. So you wouldn't say that's pretty much unique to Steve, but he started doing that a lot. But Steve added something to that. He would play the third as opposed to just doing the fifth. So if I do the major scale in G again, the third is a B. So he would play the B and the G, and it's an inversion because you're playing the B first and the G last. It's an inversion. Now that sounds like a weird chord. Listen to it. Now the standard power chord goes like this. And you hear that all the time in rock. It's easy to play. It's friendly to the ears. But this sounds weird. But what Steve would do is use that third inversion and then add it to a normal rock progression. Like a lot of rock progressions will go from G to C. So, and that's just using power chords, G to C. Now Steve, he's got to be different. Instead of doing that, he would do the G to C but use the third instead of the fifth. Now didn't that sound different then? And that was so huge to the Def Leppard sound. That slight change, that unique innovation that Steve did, really changed the sound. I mean, giving examples, you can hear it and not know what you're hearing, because a lot of people, like I said, if they say Steve Clark's song's easy to play, they're not playing it right. Let's show you his famous example of that. That's in Photograph, where he goes, "Oh, look what you've done to this rock and roll clown." hear that? Now how does that sound a lot better than, you see what I'm saying? Instead of using that standard G5, he used the inversion with the third. And that's unique. And believe it or not, you hear that in Def Leppard's, especially on Pyromania and Hysteria, all the time. Other examples, Billy's Got a Gun, my favorite song, when he goes, hey Billy! See that? He does that same progression again, and that started creating unique things to Def Leppard sounds. Even on in Hysteria, for the solo section of women, Phil's doing the solo. When he's doing that solo there, Steve's going. Now see, you don't have to do it on the A string. You can also do it on the lower E and A string. So that's that same third that he did again for that inversion. And Steve did that all the time. It really changed Def Leppard's sound. It really sounded unique. And no one before '83, rare that you heard it. If you did, I never heard it. Rock bands weren't using that. And that helped Steve to be unique. Another thing he did, the second part I want to go over, is how he played minor chords. Now understand something. When you're in a rock band and you're playing with a bunch of distortion in an arena, if you play the full power chord with all the notes in it, it'll sound muddied and clash because you got all that distortion, all that acoustics, all that feedback. It'll kick back. So Steve found a simplified way to play it on two strings that would help it sound more clear, but at the same time still get that minor feel. Now what he did was, Page was famous for using this F chord shape. You see right there? And he would slide that up and down to play chords a different way. So that's an F, that's a G, that's an A. Now what happens is you have your second finger on the first string, let's say I'm doing an A. So I got one finger on the E string, the high E, on the 5th fret, another finger on the B string in the 5th fret. Then I have my ring finger on the 6th fret on the G string, and then I have my pinky finger on the D string in the 7th fret. Now what's important is the 5th and the 7th, you hear that? Those are the same notes. So this is the root. If I want it to be a major chord, it has to have a third in it. So that is an A major right there. Like an A major has a C sharp. Let's do the major scale again. See the third? That's C sharp. See? C sharp. Now if I want it minor, we just do the Aeolian mode, and then I would do, you see that right there? Just that difference between this and this. That C and that C sharp makes it a major or minor chord. So instead of using your middle finger right here on the, in this section I use on the 6th fret, go back and play the G string on the 5th fret. So now you have an A minor chord. And that's real unique that he did that, because if you play the standard A minor up here, you can, but with all those notes, with a lot of distortion, it sounds cluttered. So when did Steve use that to make it clear? Let's look at that great break in Too Late for Love where it goes, whoa, whoa. You see that? He's actually playing a B minor, an A minor, an F sharp minor, then he goes back to an E, he goes back to an, he goes back to an E, it's an E power chord, and then he goes to an F. You see that? He's now playing those minor chords down there, and he did it on the D and the G string. You could do the same thing with the opposite, play the A string on the, let's say the 9th fret, and play the D string on the 7th fret, and you can still do the same thing right there, and it's a minor feel. he does the same progression on Coming Under Fire. That's another great song that some people say is the best song on the album. I would tell you, go check out BWM 5150's cover of that. You'll see that same chord progression. When I played it more of a traditional chord sense, that it worked because it's just me playing, but it wouldn't sound as clean live. So the way that BWM 5150 played it on his cover is how Steve would have played it live. The way I did it's something you could do in the studio on my cover, but wouldn't work as well live. So I want you to check it out. He's a great player. He does great covers on BWM 5150. But now you see with him using those F chord shapes and changing it, it sounds way cool and better, and it gives you that flavor. The last but not least is Steve learned how to use the Lydian power chord, how to change it up. Now what the Lydian is, it's the fourth mode in the major scale. Now most keys in rock are going to be played in minor keys. You see what I'm saying? And it's usually either E or A. But E minor is the same as G major, and A minor is the same as C major. So for G major, the fourth mode, 1, 2, 3, 4, C. So it's G, A, B, C. So this chord here, if I play the standard power chord, where I have the C note on the A string in the 3rd fret and the D string in the 5th fret, you can also play the D string in the 4th fret. You see what I'm saying? And use that F sharp instead of the G. And believe that little subtle change makes a huge difference in sound. And it's the same thing. That's in the key of E, E minor or G major. And if you want to go to A minor or C major, you know, the major scale. So C, D, E, F. Whenever you play an F chord, F power chord, you can use that same progression. So when does Steve do that? When does Steve do that? Now I'm stutter tongue-tied. That's the cool thing. Well, a great thing is under, now I'm trying to remember, Billy's Got a Gun. That's, again, my favorite song, where it's great because the riff of that song, that's in C, right? This song's awesome. Change keys like 4 or 5 times. Then Steve does his solo in the key of D minor. After his solo, he does that cool lick, dun, dun, dun. It goes into the key of E. Then for the next solo on the album, it goes back to the key of A minor. So there's another solo, and then it goes back to the D. But the part we want to check out is the break right after Steve's solo. So it goes. You hear that? Hear that? It took me forever to figure out what chord he was playing there. I knew it was a C, but I didn't know you could add an F sharp like that on the 4th note. And believe it or not, that subtle change really changed Def Leppard's style. It made him unique. It made it ear-friendly. And people didn't know why they were digging it, but they were really digging it. He does that again with the F chord in Foolin', where people love, is anybody out there? Check it out. Now you hear that part it goes? He goes. He's playing an E right there. Then he does the F chord shape I'm talking about because this is the same as this. It's just an octave down. So instead of going to the E string and the A string there and the 1st and 3rd fret, go to the D string and the G string and the 3rd and 5th fret. But an octave down, he does the D string in the 3rd fret and the G string in the 4th fret. That same progression goes. You see that? That little cool walk-up progression that he does, knowing if you play a major chord in a Lydian mode, that you can do that, really created a sound. And that's one of the coolest breaks and one of the best tracks on the album, Foolin'. So I hope this video was more cleaner, less mistakes as far as what chords they were and you liked it. And I really appreciate the support. You guys watching my channel. Thank you, Hurricane Joe.